It's a huge problem. It's a huge problem on the internet. We find thousands and thousands of sellers each month counterfeiting products from a variety of brands, from big brands and small brands. About 40% of our business uh, is is catered to smaller brands and smaller entrepreneurial setups, and we find those products getting counterfeited at lightning speed these days. So within a few weeks of launching a new model or a new product, you see that same product just appear on various marketplaces across the world. And this is a trend that's being enabled by cross-border e-commerce, which is again element um, has been made possible by marketplaces such as AliExpress, DHgate, sellers' ability to sell products on Amazon and ship products from Asia. So there's this big nexus of cross-border e-commerce and manufacturing setups in Asia, including China, India, Bangladesh, which is making which is making this uh, which is making this trade possible, and it's impacting brands considerably.
And what sort of products in particular are you finding are most frequently ripped off?
These people are agnostic. So anything that sells on Amazon, anything that sells on eBay, these guys are tracking all this data quite well, and they know what's selling, what's popular, and then they just copy it and sell it. So it's a pretty intelligent operation. So they know already in advance like what products they want to get into, be it vapes, be it a hookah holder, be it major perfumes and cosmetics, spirits, industry products like cognac, whiskeys, wines, all widely counterfeited. So when you buy online, be sure you're buying from a trusted place.
So obviously those are some of the products that you've mentioned are most in line. Are there any products that are immune, possibly because of the complexity in their manufacture, or some other devices that protect the IP or make it harder to copy?
I mean, I personally have not come across any of our clients because firstly, most clients approach us when there has been an incident. And then once that incident has been reported, then we go about our investigations and we go about our method to address that particular issue. I think most products, if they're popular, if you're selling them, if you're getting a good community of followers on the internet, for example, it's going to get ripped off. So it's just a matter of time. No matter how big you are, no matter how small you are, if you have a good product, if you have a good product that has a reasonable following on the internet, a million followers, and you're doing decent business, these guys get to know it pretty fast and start targeting your product on the start targeting your authorized retail channels.
And when you say investigate, what form do your investigations usually take?
So we once we identify a particular incident, right? It could happen anywhere in the world. We then start tracking that same product, same seller, same supplier in various different markets. So our first approach is to try to identify that product in different places, and then what we try to do is we try to do a few test buys to see what that product is, where it's coming from, and what the origination of that product is. Once we identify that, our job is then to identify the suppliers or any party that's facilitating that particular trade. Like when we investigate a pharmaceutical case, for example, we want to investigate not only the person that's doing that's making the product or selling the product. We're looking for the person who's making the packaging, right? So you then start narrowing down your packaging suppliers by really looking into a particular region, where there's a cosmetic business, and then start identifying based on the sophistication of the product, the various suppliers who could actually supply that product. So then it goes into, the good old investigation steps where you start contacting these suppliers, you start um, getting more information on them, and then narrowing down your scope of a target that you'd want to investigate. So it's continuously building intelligence on any incident that's happening. So wherever you find one, you'll find many.
And what are you in fact finding? You kind of imagine some sort of clandestine basement-based spirits manufacturer, for example, to pass off as an expensive brand of cognac. Is that usually what you find?
Yeah, I mean, you find them in basements, you find them in warehouses, operating at much larger scale. You find bottle manufacturers, the guys who are actually creating the bottles, the fake counterfeit bottles, and are shipping globally to various countries. So you find fake bottles, you find fake packaging, the labeling manufacturers, even manufacturers of fake QR codes that they put on the bottles. So it's a fully organized system where you have all these different components of your supply chain coming together, and then you have a facility. But when you're doing such an investigation, it's very important to go after the bottle manufacturers. It's important to go after the label manufacturers, and not only the person that's just setting up this refilling operation, because
Why is that?
because it's often connected to a larger bootlegging operation that's happening, right? When you create a fake bottle, for example, you can't just go to a machine and create one bottle. You have to have a minimum run of 10,000 bottles, right? So because it just doesn't work like that, right? A manufacturing line of a bottling plant, bottle manufacturing plant,
Mhm.
is complicated. They have to put raw materials, a mold, and run that plant for a certain amount of time, and it's go in a very continuous manner. So every time you create a fake product, you have to create many units for you to be a profitable entity. So yeah, when you break down some of these and you get into some of these targets, you'll find maybe 1,000 bottles or 500 bottles. So there's always many more that you need to go after, because there's always this loosely connected bootlegging or counterfeiting operation that we find once we investigate one.
Right. And presumably that bottle manufacturer isn't just filling the bottles of one particular brand of
Yeah.
of product, but perhaps has many customers, all of whom are bootleggers.
Yes. Yes. So generally, they again agnostic of um, your product, whatever's selling, whatever's in demand, they'll go after that. They'll either be buying those bottles from restaurants, or they'll be buying them from these bottling plants,
Yeah.
right? So and it's industrial scale.
Yes, hence my
So
question about whether this is kind of the basement operations. But I'm catching on that actually on occasion these are, when you say in warehouses, I mean that really sounds like these people operate in plain sight.
yeah, and they get a lot of visibility online. They manage to sell products via Facebook, Instagram, Taobao, 1688, Pindodo, and all these apps and services, Amazon in certain countries. Um, yeah, Shopee, Lazada. You see all these major marketplace groups. I think that the main problem with those marketplaces sometimes is that the KYCs and the backend know your customers is not in place. So you do find a lot of these products and these sellers, opportunistic sellers, start appearing online.
Mhm. And now you've said earlier that you actually go and contact these manufacturers. What do they say when you call them up and hint that you're onto them?
We don't tell them that we're onto them. We're more like mystery shoppers.
Mhm.
We go there as customers. We try to see how sophisticated they are. We try to see how what samples they give us, and then sometimes even place a larger order just to see how quickly they turn it around. Because when you place an order and you procure products, it kind of gives you a sense whether they have this product in stock or whether they're going to go out and manufacture it. And then you set up investigation on them with an investigator on the ground. But you find everything online, right? All the information, your first level of defense, your first level of knowledge gathering is all found online.
Now, at what point do you then bring in the local law enforcement people?
Once we've identified an address, once we've identified the size of the operation, we then bring in the local, police, or we file a police complaint, or if it's a civil matter, then we work through a lawsuit, work through a law firm to bring those parties, to a settlement or something. Yeah, so it's a combination of strategies.
Right. Well, let's talk about the police first. And again, as you're talking, you're kind of picturing 3 patrol cars pulling up outside the factory, and as they conduct a raid. Is that really what happens, or are you finding that the local law enforcement officials perhaps need to step up when it comes to IP knowledge and IP protection?
I think in most countries it's taken quite seriously. I wouldn't say that this is taken lightly anywhere in the world. And depending on the product category, it's taken more seriously. So if you find a fake liquor operation that's impacting state revenues, it's impacting public health. Same thing with perfumes and cosmetics and pharmaceuticals, for example. So the police have like a pretty zero tolerance for that kind of stuff. Um, Once you get into fashion and once you get into slightly less riskier product categories, then it becomes, you have to prove your case. So you can't go after like 10 units or 50 units. You have to go after 5,000 units.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to really go up and find that bigger target to go after. You can do, every now and then go do like a local market cleanup or something like that. But they just come back. It's like a whack-a-mole kind of thing. So yeah, the police is more interested, and you get a lot more support when you're bringing them cases of impact, like cosmetics or alcohol or anything that's impacting public health for that matter.
So how's your track record in prosecuting these?
At City and Authentix, we don't do any prosecutions directly, but we do have law firms who follow up on all our cases, and our conviction rates of all the cases that we worked on are quite high. So either depending on the strategy the client adopts to pursue that case, we always get the bad guy at the end of the day. Yeah.
Presumably, civil cases are easier to win than criminal ones.
Again, it depends on every country. It depends on the case, whether it's an infringement case or whether it's a straight up counterfeiting case. So an infringement case, you'd rather go through the civil route because it's not a clear counterfeit. So what we find, and this I would say especially in China, is that you get ripped off. Like your brand gets completely compromised by other brands and similar registrations. So so you have to be very vigilant even on your trademark portfolio to make sure that no new third-party brands, or sorry, third-party companies are coming in there and registering your trademark, because in China, that's like a business, right? So the minute you have a trademark that's registered in the West and you haven't done a registration in China, you have these bad faith registrations that kind of get registered in China. And if you don't have the protection and coverage in China, then you lose access to that market, and you lose access to enforcing in that market. So it's always very important to get your protection, get your trademarks and IP registered if you think that you'd at some point in the future want to enforce or sell in that country. So I would say there's a few countries where you should be a lot more vigilant uh, than others, and China is one of them. So you find that, supposing your trademark is ABC, you'll find someone come up with a trademark that's ACB, and then if they have a trademark like that registered, then they're going to be all over your product by creating similar products and confusing the customer.
Now, you say that your success rate is pretty high. What usually marks the difference between something that is likely to be successful and what isn't? What tends to be that critical piece of information, perhaps critical piece of evidence, maybe support from local officials?
From our side, we don't have that much to do with local officials, in the sense that we stop our investigation at intelligence gathering, and then we work with the local officials at some point, hand it over to a law firm or hand it over, so we don't have that direct relationship with the local officials. I think where you sometimes lose a lead, and that's a very good question, is when it comes to cross-border counterfeiting. So what I mean by cross-border counterfeiting is sellers that are based in China and shipping into, Singapore, shipping into Hong Kong and the likes, right, through all these platforms like Shopee, Lazada, etc. So you kind of lose control of what happens when that product moves from when the product moves cross-border. So you miss a trick there, because it's very difficult to then trace that product back to its source, because there are all these logistics companies that are sitting in the middle that are not sharing the correct information, or they might even not have the correct information of where that product came from. So if you can't trace that, then you have a bit of a problem. So the method that we use that works well to build our leads and everything is to, for all these cross-border, the minute we've identified whether a seller is a cross-border seller, we try to take it down, and we try to then lobby with the marketplace to say that, anyone using our brand selling from this country is going to be dealing in fakes. This is the evidence that we have. And then we try to build a structured program for them to stop that particular product being sold cross-border. And then the second thing is, you look at the local sellers, the sellers that are buying this product from overseas, getting it in, holding a local inventory, and then disseminating it, right? So there's a larger shipment that comes in. So we have access to a lot of trade databases, and we analyze a lot of shipment data of products, of products moving from high-risk countries to other countries, and then actually seeing what's the likelihood of your product being counterfeited in your home country, or a country that you're trying to protect. Mm-hmm. So that's a very important thing that we do. Single parcel. We've addressed this cross-border issues. We've done several cases of doing the investigation and gathering evidence for law firms for suits against various international cross-border e-commerce platforms. Sometimes you manage to settle it, with just a cease and desist. Sometimes you have to take them to court, and the like. So there's a lot of stuff out there on the internet where you know the brands that are doing this. It's kind of privileged, so I can't really talk about it.
Sure.
I can't talk about the platforms that are being, but everyone knows them, so it's implied.
Yes. Well, and I suppose the internet means that while clearly, even if you did remind certain platforms of their KYC requirements, there are lots of other platforms that are probably provide a different avenue.
Yeah, I don't think there's so many local laws that protect internet companies, from liability of being sued. Gives them a kind of a very good defense, right? I think, and gives them a good defense and gives them an incentive to not do as much as they should be doing. The sellers, on the other hand, have a free show because they know that for every product they sell, they're paying the marketplace that much. The marketplace is making it a commission, or it's getting getting revenue for advertisements. So they're not going to support you all the way. They make money off this activity as well. So in fact, yeah, so they make money off this trade as well. So I mean, I don't see it going away until the local laws make it very clear that that marketplaces should remove the anonymity that they provide to sellers. So you should show all the registration information of that seller. Like Amazon, I mean, like the UK, no seller is allowed to sell online without actually disclosing all kinds of information, including its tax information, address, etc. So you somehow you lose that sense of anonymity on the internet. Whereas a lot of these are many countries, you don't have to do that. So when you work with that sense of anonymity, you can sell anything you want, and it becomes very difficult for you to actually move up the value chain and find that seller.
So apart from tightening local laws, what else can you do, or are you perhaps even encouraging your clients to do in order to put more pressure on those platforms that make money at collecting commissions on counterfeit products?
We always say, dialogue is good. So you have to keep facing these marketplaces with evidence, and you have to keep showing them that there's a counterfeiting issue. You have to keep filing complaints. You have to keep the pressure up on them constantly. And at some point, you whenever you're ready to pull the trigger and you say that they're not doing enough, then you have all this years of evidence and years of documented evidence to say that, look, you tried to resolve this issue in an amicable manner, but couldn't.
Mm-hmm. Have your customers ever thought of a boycott of some sort, or a campaign against these platforms in the public domain?
Yes, I mean, and these are they've been well documented, and a boycott for them will be what? It's like just not selling on those marketplaces.
Perhaps,
I think, yeah,
putting their allegations in the public domain, difficult as that may be, but.
And there's, I would say, most corporations, while they love, I mean, most corporations will follow that strategy of a boycott to a certain degree until it impacts the business. So, you don't want to, shut down your official store on a major marketplace, which is, getting you 20% of your revenue, for example, to get them to the negotiating table. So, the partnerships and the associations between brands and e-commerce platforms is also getting stronger. So there is like this mutual respect that I think you can get if you're selling your product on the marketplace. But many brands don't like selling products on marketplaces, you know, or through a particular marketplace, because they feel that, as you said, you know, a lot of the customer data goes to these marketplaces. They know exactly what's being produced and what's selling, and then it gives them an opportunity to recruit more sellers that are selling similar products, and therefore destroying your price, your price margins.
Mm-hmm. Well, is there anything else that the owners of these designs can do, let's say in the manufacturing process, in order to make it more visible to consumers that they are getting the fake product, where perhaps even to the extent that, you know, showing off the counterfeit handbag is more likely to get stares rather than accolades?
Yeah, so we worked on many strategies. So one is an educational strategy. So when you see a product that's not meant to be there, and it's really infringing, then, you know, you go out with a communication campaign to say, be careful, don't buy this product, and you do that proactively. The second thing is authentication, and consumer involvement is like the next big thing. Is like what we do, and we encourage a high level of consumer involvement in authentication of the product. And you can enable this with all kinds of tricks and tips, which is like, you know, putting a QR code on it and scanning that product, and you know, getting a lot of intelligence about where your product is, where it's being sold. So, you know, if there's even a cross-border gray market issue, you're being able to kind of collect that intelligence through a very strong track and trace and authentication program. The third pillar, so that's imperative. If you're manufacturing something, have a good track and trace program, know where your product is, and know who's selling it. The third pillar, of course, which is probably, I should have said, is the first pillar, is trademark registrations and IP registrations. Trademark registrations in various countries, get those done. If you can get a copyright, you know, which is registered in jurisdiction like America, it gives you a lot of power to enforce across the world using that copyright. And then, you know, there's patents and utility patents, etc., which are extremely useful to deal with marketplaces where your products are going to get ripped off, right? What you brought to the first point that you brought up, Mark, which was very quickly you'd see knockoffs appearing. So sometimes knockoffs don't appear with your trademark. Knockoffs just appear, right? Like that octopus we saw. So it won't have the brand on it, it'll just be the octopus. So you got to protect the octopus.
Yes, we're talking about a little green octopus, possibly out of your reach now.
Exactly.
This a little bit earlier, but, you know, stuffed toys. I suppose the kids who buy them, the consumers of these products, don't much care whether it's now the expensive stuffed toy or whatever it happens to be, or whether it just does the job. You know, in the trade of wildlife and animal products, you would have heard the campaign slogan, "When the buying stops, the killing can too." So presumably this would also go online, right? I mean, if consumers actually stopped buying the knockoff handbags, the knockoff shoes, the knockoff electronics, then perhaps this wouldn't be so much of an issue.
Yeah, in fact, we do a lot of work, or we've done a lot of work in the past for wildlife organizations such as BirdLife Foundation. And the kind of stuff we found, it's sad, you know. We found cheetahs being sold on Middle Eastern, you know, marketplaces. We found rare birds like falcons and stuff being sold on various marketplaces. And the funny thing is, the way they started, you know, after there was this big crackdown, they'd come up with good anonymous names for those particular animals. They'd say, you know, a teddy bear, and that's like referring to a cheetah cub, or for orangutan, they'll come up with a different name for it. So you find this stuff online, and be it on social media, or these marketplaces and these yellow page listing type of sites. You find them, including Craigslist. Yeah.
Well, it's clearly difficult to find an easy solution to it. Otherwise, you would have already been doing it. But so it looks like the idea of investigations, enforcement is going to be with us for some time. What's your message to the smaller companies which might actually be flattered by the fact that there are others who like their products so much? Are there in fact smaller companies that say, well, there's not much we can do, enforcement is expensive, we're just going to let it rest? What's your message to them?
Our message to them is very simple: adopt a zero tolerance policy. Adopt a zero tolerance policy against this kind of activity. Otherwise, it's just going to eat into your business and kill it over the long run. I mean, even over the short run. So if your small business is anyway associated to the online world, if you're doing promotions on the online world, if you're selling on the online world, or even the real world for that matter, you have to be very, very, very vigilant. You have to have the right protections. You have to have the right track and trace, and you have to have the right intelligence function to tell you when things are going wrong. From our big customers, they're like machines, because today you have that system where you can estimate what your sale is going to be down to a particular market. The minute there's a drop in sales, the indication is that there's a counterfeiting activity in that particular market. Investigators go in, check products, sort it out, move out. Small companies don't have that opportunity. So it is extremely important for them to at least build their systems to find these types of issues across the board. And today, with the various technologies and the various services out there, it is not that expensive to do this stuff. It's not that expensive to take care of this type of problems that you find.
But you're very firm on that. I mean, it sounds like you've seen this where small companies have in fact gone under because they haven't pursued it, and perhaps the counterfeit product was even more popular than the original.
Yeah, I mean, a case in example, not a client of ours, but Supreme, for example, they got counterfeited, or technically not counterfeited, because they didn't have strong trademark registrations.
But what was the product?
Supreme. Have you heard of the brand Supreme? It's a skateboarding brand in the US.
I'm way too old for skateboarding. So they actually went under, is that right?
No, they didn't go under, but now they have they have another trademark. So the original creator didn't have a global trademark, and there was a Spanish company that registered the same trademark and started making the same products. And now for the American Supreme, it's impossible for them to sell in certain markets because even that second seller has a trademark registered. Yeah. So it's be very clear on what you want. Be very clear in terms of your global ambitions. When you start out, make sure you have a good IP registration that's kind of covering your base trademark or your mother trademark in many markets, and then start registering your trademark locally as well, in China, in certain countries. So the WIPO system gives you a good cover to at least protect yourself in many countries. So be very vigilant on your IP and continue to enforce it, because if you don't enforce it, then you lose it. So I think the four pillars of brand protection. One is having your trademarks and having your IP cover, so that you have something to enforce. And I think small companies often are not geared for that. It's crazy how many times we have a company that comes in and says that, oh, we haven't got a registration in China, for example. So as an online provider, as an investigator, we can't do anything in China for them. So it's really important to get your trademark portfolio correct, or your patent portfolio, as well as your copyrights and your designs. Get your IP in place.
Especially in China, does it matter if you have a trademark in China?
Oh yeah. I mean, it's essential. You can't do anything without a trademark in China.
But even as but the point is that as a foreign country, a company, so many foreign companies have looked to enforce their trademarks in China and faltered because they were foreign.
No, that's not true.
No?
If you have a trademark registered in China, you have the right to enforce it.
Right, because you remember the Ferrero Rocher case some years ago, where everybody was surprised that Ferrero managed to enforce the design of the Rocher wrapping and the way that the biscuit is manufactured. People were surprised because ordinarily things don't go the way of foreign companies. You're saying that that's not the case.
It's changing. It's changing. They've, like, the courts are getting. The courts are, you're seeing good decisions come out consistently now. So it's in a way, I would say, but that's expensive stuff. Like when you go after like a design, and when you go after thing, you have to work through law firm, and your budgets could be like 20, 30, 50,000, 100,000. So you're not going after like a typical small case. You're going after an infringement case. So it's not like your typical case of counterfeiting, for example. Yeah. Okay. So infringement is always more difficult to resolve, but there are ways and provisions to do it. So supposing, as I said, an infringement is when you have ABC and your brand is ABC and somebody's made it ACB, and then you have to go to the courts to say, cancel this trademark because it's confusing my customers, right? And then the court will then look at the evidence that you present and then decide whether to cancel it or not. And then once it gets canceled, then those products are treated as counterfeits. But otherwise, in China, you have to have, and I think everywhere in the world, the trademark has to be on the bottle. There has to be a violation of your trademark for it to get seized, for the goods to be seized. Yeah. Cool. So it is. So I would say that in order, having a strong IP portfolio, having a strong authentication and track and trace program, then having a good intelligence program to track where your product is being sold and how it's being sold. And this intelligence gathering, you can use many tools to gather that intelligence. You can use your customers, which is free. You can use market surveys and many other things to see where your product is being sold. And finally, have a strong enforcement policy, a zero tolerance policy. Because the minute you start saying that, okay, I've become aware of this, but I'm going to forget about it, you keep seeing these guys who come and they keep testing you until you'll have to do something about it. And it might be too late to put the genie back in the bottle.